Welcome. We meet this week during that particularly multifaceted time of year between Christmas and New Year's. I suppose I should speak for myself in saying that it is multifaceted, as I find myself in a somewhat ambivalent posture as a general expectation descends upon us all to wish one another happy holidays, even when our own very minor holiday is already weeks past. And New Year's Eve, for many of us, does not necessarily rise to the level of a holiday. It is certainly an opportunity to acknowledge the passing of a year and to wish each other health and happiness in the new year. But the generalized concept of a universal holiday season feels a bit manufactured to me. Nevertheless, I do welcome the generous impulses and friendly interchanges that I find characteristic of this time of year. I also, true confessions here, love the holiday that is Christmas lights. As someone who is quite aware of the short days of winter, I find the lights an uplifting response to the darkest time of year. Their origin is the same as the lights of our festival of Hanukkah, a pagan past that found the shorter, darker days somewhat frightening and intimidating, and kindled lights, fire originally, in response. Our Hanukkah lights are likewise supposed to be displayed publicly in the windows of our homes. Even when they are, if the holiday concludes by early December, as it did this year, we are many weeks away from the increase in daylight that the winter solstice promises. Thus, the Christmas lights displayed on houses, in stores, and even in the streets of our communities lend an air of festivity and even anticipation to the eventual lengthening of the days and the end of winter. As a Jew, it is a guilty pleasure to enjoy the trappings of someone else's holiday, but perhaps that is a consequence and even advantage of living in a multicultural country. It is also one of the advantages of living in a relatively free country, one in which religion is not established or regulated by the state. I'm afraid that I will be absolutely predictable in pointing out that it is Judaism that brought the concept of religious freedom into the world, and it did so in the story that began just this last Shabbat as we turned to the book of Exodus in the Torah. So before we go there, let us pause for a moment. Let us take our break to breathe as we consider the gift of freedom, that gift that we enjoy right here, right now, in this moment. So let us take our meditative postures. I am doing so in a slightly different location than usual. I am in Minneapolis, visiting my daughter and grandchildren, and it is very cold here. We are in single digits. So if the cold in Cleveland is bothering you at all, just think of how much worse it could be. All right, so let us take our meditative postures with our feet firmly placed on the ground and our bodies at ease but attentive. We might place our hands in our laps or on the arms of our chairs, and let us take inventory of our bodies and let go of those holdings. I noticed this week in particular that when we are cold, my shoulders were hunched up against my ears against the cold. I think we just tense our entire bodies or pull them inwards in a way that we imagine might make us warmer. So for right now, hopefully we are in the warm spaces of our homes. Let us let go. And for me, it helps to close my eyes. It might help you to do the same or to focus softly on some point, some indiscriminate point in front of you in the distance. But to take inventory inside, it's helpful to close our eyes and to go from our heads, the very tips of our heads, down to the ends of our hair, and just to release our scalps, our jaws, our ears, our jaws again, so important. Even the tongues that sometimes we hold. Ready to speak, to eat, to do any number of things. Let us release our necks, our shoulders. You might roll them one direction or another, or both. You might swing your head around. When I do that, I hear all the creaking of what I assume are bones and muscles and cartilage and ligaments and all those things. Once again, we let our shoulders go, our arms kind of drop. Let us release our tummies. And then our waists, thighs, lower legs, feet, wiggling our toes. And once we have done that, let us just enjoy that moment for the moment of release. And then let us take a deep breath. Differently than we do most of the time, intentionally, with focus, with purpose. And we want to fill up from the tips of our heads that we just released so that we could make room to our faces, our throats, our lungs, our tummies. And we imagine the breath going to the tips of our fingers and down through our knees to the tips of our toes. And if there are any places that are bothersome, that are giving you pain, uncomfortability, let's just try to breathe into them. It's not a cure-all, certainly, but it is a way of treating that pain gently, not fighting it, but caressing it, massaging it, with the idea that our breath is reaching it. And as we do this, we might hold the breath for a moment, enjoying that full feeling we rarely stop to make happen. And then we let it go. And we can rest at the outset, at the release, for a moment also, before we feel the impulse to breathe in again. And as we do, we might even acknowledge or offer a small prayer of gratitude for all the parts of our bodies that do work, even with our aches and our pains and our difficulties, and they exist. They are real. There is much that works and for which we can be grateful. And it is remarkable because what does work works 24/7. And we rely upon it all the time. No time off, no breaks, no vacations, no excused absences. Let us breathe in the wonder of our bodies, touching every part of them with our inhalation. And equally grateful, let us breathe out. And perhaps even send out any hurt or pain we may be feeling. If you are hearing the noises of my computer, please forgive me. I don't know how to stop them. So I ignore them and ask you to do the same. And with a few more breaths, let us acknowledge that we are doing this freely because we want to, because it's part of our routines or our interests. We can sit here, turn on our computers, and access whatever it is that might feed us at any given moment. As Jews, we believe that freedom is given us by God. We know this story well. The enslavement and then exodus from Egypt to become a free people, answerable only to God. It is our Passover story, our foundational story, the series of events that constituted us, the Jewish people, and continues to inform our beliefs and our very existence. I am awed by this reality. It is the Jewish people that brought to the world the idea of freedom for all of humanity. Until we insisted that this was a condition of being human, derived from our common creation by a single God, only the rich and the powerful could function freely as they chose. The common person, the masses of humanity, could aspire only to what their rulers allowed. The Jews said no to this state of affairs. We said that we answer only to the authority of God, the one who freed us from Egypt and who formed a covenant with us at Mount Sinai. This was a revolutionary idea, and it was not the only one we brought into the world. It was also the Jew who said that as a consequence of being free, every living creature is entitled to rest. Every human being, every animal, even the earth itself. We asserted as well the equality of every human being with every other, and we affirmed that life is meaningful, potentially beautiful, and ultimately sacred. There is something else, also from the teachings of the first portion of the book of Exodus. At the burning bush, Moses asks God to identify God's self. Who shall I say sent me? Asks Moses, anticipating the Israelites' skepticism when Moses appears to free them from slavery. God sort of answers the question, but opens up a whole new way of thinking when God answers. Tell them it is Ayeh Asher Ayeh who sent you. Ehyeh, asher ehyeh, which means I will be what I will be, or I will be who I will be. God's answer is a form of the verb to be, and in that formulation opens up all kinds of possibilities for each of us. We are never condemned to be what we were or what we currently are. We possess always the power to change and to grow, to fulfill a better image of ourselves, to ascend to, or for that matter, to descend from our current state of being. As Rabbi Michael Strassfeld has written, the God of the Exodus tells Moses not to think that there is one fixed notion that describes God. The God of Exodus is the God of freedom, which by definition requires an understanding of God as ever-changing. God says, I will be what I will be, and so can you. The world is a world of possibility and change. Judaism is at its heart a revolutionary tradition that seeks to challenge rather than uphold the status quo. Despite how Judaism is sometimes presented, its purpose is not to preserve the Jewish past. It is a call for change. It questions what is. It reminds us that Jews were slaves and were liberated, and that is the beginning of our story. We are to make our story every person's story. That is, a story of the freedom to exercise choice. It is remarkable to me to think of all we take for granted that has come from this seemingly simple but profoundly complex idea of freedom. We only have to think about how many people don't enjoy it. I would suggest that from this idea of freedom emerges our concepts of justice and mercy, of the sanctity of life, of a moral universe in which there are eternal truths upon which we all depend, such as do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, and so on. Such overarching commandments would have no authority in a hierarchical world where equality is a gift, not a right or an essential quality of being. Ehyeh, asher ehyeh. We all will be what we will be. That is the true light of our faith and of every season. Perhaps we might continue to behold the physical lights of this season as markers along our path, helping to illumine our future, a time of true freedom, justice, righteousness, and peace for all of God's creation. As prelude to our last few moments of breathing together, let me share with you words from two of my most favorite poets. Mary Oliver writes, light is an invitation to happiness, and that happiness, when it's done right, is a kind of holiness, palpable and redemptive. I'm not someone who has much to do with organized religion, but I do have a belief in the holiness of light and in the happiness it can induce in one. Is it possible, even, that the light of the world, carefully observed, enters us, enters our breathing, and even our souls? There is a morning meditation that John O'Donohue speaks about in The Four Elements, John O'Donohue being the other favorite poet, or another favorite poet. You simply breathe the light into you, he says. When you breathe out the darkness. Clods of heavy charcoal sadness can leave your soul on the outward breath. You breathe in the light and breathe out the darkness. once we have learned to breathe the light into our everyday life, it is only fitting to share it, to let others catch our soul light. Let us breathe. With that, those wonderful thoughts of breathing in the light of the world and letting it fill us inside as we just sent the breath, imagining it. As we imagine the breath going to every extremity, let us likewise imagine the light going there as well, filling us up, filling us up. And on the exhale, letting go of the darkest places and the darknesses that are part of every one of us. We breathe in the light. And I hope you are not hearing, but you might be, the squeals of my grandchildren downstairs. Everything is fine, but they can be noisy. But that is a light that I breathe in. And we breathe out any darkness. What a wonderful idea. What a wonderful imagining that might be helpful. Might be a helpful motivation for our meditation, especially if we're feeling down. It's a good time just to sit down, take our meditative posture, release all the holding places in our bodies, and breathe in the light of the world, the light that is just outside our windows, the light represented by the lamps in our homes, by the idea of home fires, of miracles of light. We breathe that in to every part of our bodies. And when we can fill them no more with either the breath or breathing in the light, let us release the darkness, the sadness, the down moments, the anxieties, the worries. And we breathe in again. And when we can feel no longer and hold on to it no longer, we release. Imagining every dark place going out with our breath. By way of conclusion, the Persian poet Hafiz writes about the effects of light, how it acts as encouragement to the frightened soul. And I invite you to continue to breathe even as we conclude formally this break to breathe. The poet asks, how did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all of its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. I wish you a good week, a week of breathing in the light and allowing our soul lights to emerge into the world, a world that will observe the passing of 1 year and the beginning of a new one, 2022, always a time for looking inward and looking outward, for giving thanks and bringing light into our relationships, our thinking, our everyday actions, our entire beings. Let it be a healthy week. God bless. And I will see you next week in 2022.